back this week for week 11. We're going to be talking about learner diversity and just discussing some of those questions. I'll start off with the first one, which is how did we ensure success for our students with NEPs? What did we do differently to cater for their needs during our practicals?
I've, in the past on prac, had a student whose reading, it was a year 8 class, and his reading level was very far behind the rest of the class. So we had like text-to-speech software that he used when we were reading stuff, which definitely helped a lot for his understanding.
Mm-hmm.
So in my first practicum, I had a couple of students who had NEPs, but my mentor teacher really believed in, because science as a topic, she believed that is something to actually inquire, and it is meant to be about your you developing your science inquiry skills or your knowledge about it. So she didn't really want to, she was very adamant on ensuring that students aren't actually, told to learn less about it. They're just helped in their journey to the same, I guess, objective as other students. So we had like things like for their tests or for a practical test, which was one of the assessments I did with them, students who were on an NEP had the choice of using sort of a little cue cards which had some information on it. It would take a lot of time if I was like to explain, but I guess that's like a good way of still ensuring all students. I think the main thing would be to ensure that students are all achieving the same learning objectives rather than learning something completely different.
Yeah, not altering the curriculum so much that they're basically just doing something completely different. Yeah.
So I think like I haven't had much experience with students who actually have like the proper NEPs, the proper title of it. But I have had lots of students who have had their like diverse needs. So I've taught students who have been autistic, students who are speaking English as a second language. I had one student who was dyslexic, and just like a range of needs. And I think like, it's going to sound very generic, but I think just like knowing your students and like, when you set an activity for these kids, checking in and making sure they're like understanding what is asking from them, and understanding like and making sure they can actually like do the work that you're setting for them. So really just like knowing your students and like knowing what they can and can't do, and communicating with them and their parents to find out how to best cater for them.
Yeah. Yeah, even I haven't had much experience, but my recent placement, what my supervising teacher did was there were these 2 students who actually needed help. So what he did was most of for the fill in the blanks questions, for example, he actually gave the answers for them to choose which one's right, but other students didn't get any help at all. So that's the alteration he did to help these students.
Is that a bit of like differentiation there, or?
It's the same questions, but for example, like we did an earthquake reading competition, and there we had some gaps left for the students to fill the technical terms. So for the other students, he actually didn't give any hint, so they had to just fill it by understanding. But for these kids, he actually gave 10 words to choose from, so that they can actually do it properly compared to other students.
That's good.
I think as well, so like even though I didn't have students who actually had NEPs, on my third year placement I had some students who were working at quite a fair bit lower level than the rest of the students, and my mentor teachers said these students should have NEPs, but perhaps because of like funding or whatever, they hadn't been granted that yet. So I think, along with knowing your students, to actually like be advocates for your students and advocate for, what they need to be able to learn, and to try and get anything for them when they need them is really important.
Good point.
Definitely,
No, you go, Miles.
Thanks. Yeah, I found on my placement, my last placement as well, that definitely just talking to teachers about what they've found works for those students personally is a really good way to kind of like share any breakthroughs and stuff that individual teachers have with teaching students with NEPs or any learning difficulty, whether it's diagnosed or not.
I had a student with dyslexia, and I found that some of the things some strategies which worked well for her learning was giving instructions in multiple ways. So not just kind of giving a task sheet and then handing it out and just hoping students would learn, but obviously verbal instruction, also in other formats, or even scaffolding the instructions into smaller bits rather than just one whole thing. Things like using the smartboard or the projector a lot, using videos, things like that really helped. But I think that kind of stuff actually would help with all students. I think all students could benefit from scaffolding tasks because it just breaks them down for them. But I think
it's really good. A huge variety of ways to cater for students. That's really good. All right, move on to the next question. How might you better prepare yourself for a diverse classroom environment? Another question was, how will you differentiate in the future? I just want to start off by saying it kind of sucked that we didn't get to do differentiation like earlier on in the course. I think it would have been really good because then I could have practiced my differentiation more throughout all my practicals, because I think I only got to do that in the last one and I didn't even complete that. So, but what were your experiences doing differentiation in your final prac?
I was going to say what Shika was just talking about is a good way to prepare yourself for a diverse learning environment. Like if you prepare different methods of delivery for something so that you're not just coming to a class and being like, oh no, now I have to like prepare this whole extra way to deliver this because it's not going to work for certain students. Like if you've already kind of prepared different methods of delivery for something, so it's not just like, oh, here's a handout, read the information and then go from there, then you're already more prepared for learner diversity.
I think obviously it's a bit difficult standing in the position we are right now, not in a classroom, not with students, to kind of prepare for differentiation. Like we have the knowledge from topics that we've previously done to how to differentiate for different learners. But I think at the end of the day, once we're in the classroom, there are strategies we can do to actually differentiate. So initially it would be things like getting to know our students, their interests, their learner profiles, their readiness levels. And you can do it through, pre-tests, you can do it through like discussions. There's like multiple ways, and then you can sort of understand what students really require and the kind of differentiation you can put into your classroom. So I feel like it's hard to say just what we can do to prepare. Obviously, maybe there could be ways of finding new like tasks in your own subjects which can be differentiated, because I know some things in science are kind of hard to differentiate, like things like tests. You can't really differentiate tests. But I guess the best thing you can do is prepare students better for it.
I think of like in terms of preparing myself for a diverse classroom, it's literally just like knowing what works for maybe like specific needs. So for example, like, what you would do with a student with ADHD, what you would do with a student who has dyslexia, there's like very broad strategies that can work for those types of students, and knowing what they are, knowing what the students might be like in the classroom before you actually go in and do it. And I suppose having an open mind as well, not expecting all students to be learning the same, which I think we all pretty much understand nowadays.
Even I was thinking something similar to you, Alicia. So because we should know different types of symptoms or conditions of different types of learning disabilities. So that way we can actually address them very well. And at the same time, like I think it's good if we can actually have a knowledge about different cultures as well, because sometimes we feel like students are not engaging. For example, one of the examples that was brought up by one of my lecturers was that, for Aboriginal students, sometimes they don't actually look at you when you're teaching, but they are not looking at you not because they don't understand, but the thing is from their culture, actually, they don't actually look at someone else when they are teaching, or especially for if there's someone who's an elder. So those types of things are also important when it comes to identifying students. So I think during our study period, actually, we should try to understand those types of things as well.
Yeah, not just learner diversity, but cultural diversity as well.
Yeah. I guess that also comes back to just generally being open-minded as well, because you have to, even if you're not completely aware of something like that, like a cultural difference, like if you're actually open to the fact that not every student learns the same, then you can pick up on those things as you go as well and adapt.
Yeah. That's really good. I just want to add for my placement, when we were preparing for the unit that we were going to teach, we wanted to develop a task that would for some students with both sort of, I think, speech and reading impediments. So the school had a resident speech pathologist / literacy expert. So she had a whole bunch of resources, ways that would help students with their specific needs. She was like, that might be actually a good way for them to develop this skill of theirs or this, and it was really, really helpful. Just having a professional, on the school side. Not all schools can get that, but she was really helpful.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, we'll move on. Now we're going to be talking about SSOs in the classroom. So can we leave the majority of working with students with diverse needs to the SSOs in the classroom? What role does an SSO play in catering for learner diversity?
I think it's a good because you know how we are actually doing a degree full of different types of topics, right? So we ultimately graduate with a certificate and we get the teaching license. But when we go to our classrooms, actually, we need SSOs to help us. So, but one time, one of my other lecturers was telling that sometimes SSOs actually don't have much qualifications. But the thing is, the main thing is they can help us because they are trying to have a good relationship with the students. And I think basically their role is actually trying to understand the student, and they try to build up that relationship, so that sometimes they don't actually come to us, the students, but they try to go to the SSO to get the help.
Yeah, I had that experience at my placement where my mentor teacher, one of the students didn't really like talking to my mentor teacher, but was happy to talk with the SSO, and so the teacher could use the SSO, pass on information and discuss. And she was a really, really good SSO, so that was great.
I feel like the overall thing is that not everything should be left to an SSO, because as Apalitha said, that they don't always have the qualifications as you would as a teacher. So as a teacher, you still have the responsibilities of creating a task which is suitable for that student, and creating lesson plans and stuff which cater for that student. But it is the SSO that can help you to actually give attention to that student, because obviously when there's 30 students or 25 students in your class, you can't give specific attention to every little sort of thought that is going through that student's head, I guess. But that SSO helps. But you can't just obviously fully rely on the SSO to be she'll go in or he'll go and create a lesson to cater for that student. So I think they're more of a supportive role.
I think it's important to remember that the actual differentiation of the work you're supplying is still your job, not
the SSO.
you give the same work and then the SSO helps differentiate it for them. Like it's definitely still your job to do that part, and then the SSO can still provide support.
Yeah.
Everyone happy with that? Move on. All right.
So,
all right, last section. What do you understand to be the difference between outcomes and standards in learning? Which one do you think is the most helpful in trying to prepare learning experiences for students with diverse abilities? So, outcomes versus standards. My understanding is that outcomes aren't really, they're not really graded or necessarily recognised by the curriculum. Yeah, I don't know. An example I was thinking, I don't know if it's going to make sense, but say a student who has a disability that impairs their ability to throw a ball, right? Maybe in PE, the grade level to throw a ball, or the curriculum achievement is like year 2, but the student's in year 8. But if by the end of the year you can get them to throw a ball, that's like a huge improvement and an outcome. But according to the curriculum, they should be this level where they should be able to, like, I don't know, shoot a ball and stuff. So, outcomes are really graded.
But it's like a personal improvement sort of thing.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
As opposed to like meeting the standard for their age level or...
Yeah.
I think with outcomes between standards, what I understand is all students can learn the same learning outcome. So like at the end of a lesson or at the end of the unit, all students could have learnt and achieved the same learning outcome. So all students could have learnt how to count, but maybe not all students will achieve the standard they should be at that level.
Yeah.
But they would have still probably learnt something to achieve that outcome. Like they're still learning.
Yeah. Like your outcome's not going to be like can display this skill at an excellent level because that's like a standard. But it would be like students will understand the broader idea of this. Yeah. Yeah, and then I guess...
Right, you go.
I was just going to talk, because the next part of the question is which are most helpful in trying to prepare learning experiences for students with diverse ability.
I would say outcomes are, because standards don't really allow for the it doesn't really allow for students to actually see their progression and their achievements. It's just kind of like, oh, you're not at this level, so that's it. But whereas outcomes, you can say to a student, look, well, this is where you sat before we started this, and this is where you sit now, so look at this, just progress you have made, look at these achievements. So I think it's a lot more true to student achievement rather than standards.
Yeah.